Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Friend Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, and I'm joined today by two of my wise and wonderful colleagues, Ms. Sara. Sara, how are you doing this fine, Tuesday afternoon?
I'm doing well, and it's raining, which is great. We need it, and it always comes at this time of year. Unfortunately, when everyone else is being flooded.
Yes, and also Mr. Terence Corrigan. Terence, how are you?
Oh, again, Nick, and yourself? Feeling good?
Yeah. No, everything is all right.
And Sora's quite right about the rain.
It's quite lovely.
Killing me.
It's not the sort of merciless drum beats that we had, I think, at the end of last year, which destroyed a couple of podcasts that I tried to record. I'm of course wearing my Daily Friend shirt. Sorry. It's a good day to talk about the weird and wacky things going on in South Africa. And of course, the first of this is some things that came out at the Zondo Commission yesterday, they didn't really come out, but they came into the news in the Zondo Commission yesterday. And this was a testimony by the State Security Agency chairperson of a high-level review panel that was set up to investigate the actions of the State Security Agency, or the SSA, which is South Africa's sort of spy network. CIA. The chairperson of this panel was Sydney Mfumandi, and he was reporting back on what he had found. He said that the State Security Agency had basically been a political tool of former President Jacob Zuma, that it had been spending money, giving money to him, testing his food for toxins, infiltrating the media. Allegedly, Zuma made a proclamation that established a special operations unit in around 2011, and the unit was disbanded in 2018. The panel was alleged to have used 1.2 million rand and then an additional 4.5 million rand to get then Minister David Mahlobo to bribe judges in favor of Zuma, although there's no evidence. Mfumandi said that these bribes were ever actually given to judges, and also that Zuma was receiving money, that former apartheid operative Eugene de Kock was paid money by this unit, that Zuma's estranged wife was also given money by this unit, and that there were projects being run by the State Security Agency to undermine Cyril Ramaphosa's internal ANC campaign and to infiltrate trade unions and, as I said earlier, the media through the African News Network, which is, I believe, Iqbal Surveys, a media group. And the secrecy in the intelligence agency, they used this to prevent Parliament from being able to see exactly what they were up to. So let me start with you, Terence. I don't think it's any surprise for several reasons, but one of them is that the ANC has, and Zuma in particular, of course, he has a background in spying and intelligence and all that sort of stuff. So it's no surprise, really, that I think he state captured, so to speak, the security agency. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, that was a concern right at the beginning, and Dr. Mufumandi's report, I think, just set out how poisonous the whole situation had become. The interesting thing is that this report was released in 2018. This information is not generally new, but it seems to have evaded most public attention, which is concerning, to say the least. Look, if I going through that report, the theme that keeps on jumping up is politicization. If there's one agency in a state that should be guided by the strictest meritocratic professionalism, it is your intelligence services, because they do function of necessity under the radar. Unfortunately, go back to the 1990s when the ANC adopted cadre deployment. I think they actually mentioned the intelligence services explicitly when they announced their intention. Like so much of the state, these things were intentionally politicized. It's not that it sort of happened because someone did something and we don't really understand it. People with political backgrounds were put into positions on the understanding, tacit or explicit, that they were going to be serving a party political purpose. The ANC did not have the coherence to sustain this over any kind of a period, and that that unity started to fall apart immediately. So when we see that that they're funneling money to Zuma, and they were getting toxicologists to find expired cool drink in his pantry, which apparently they did, which I suppose is good because one shouldn't drink expired cool drink. When they were trying to infiltrate guys into newsrooms, which incidentally has a personal resonance for me, because I attended the Truth Commission hearings on the media, which were held in the SABC building. There's a huge irony there. There was this atmosphere of moral outrage that the profession of journalism was besmirched by the nefarious machinations of the apartheid state's intelligence apparatus. Well, plus the change. These things just kind of roll on. The old order giveth birth to the new that looks remarkably like what it came out of. It's distressing, but you see, this also says to me that this is a situation where you need to actually sort of pull down the foundational thinking. Don't warble on about how we're going to be doing this new style cadre deployment. It's going to be so great because we've learned all these mistakes, and these are going to be like really great top guys that we choose from the party, not like the guys who weren't the top guys that we put in previously. Actually, no. You need if for your city engineer as well as for your top spook, you need somebody who sort of committed to the job. And look, with spooks, you take a major risk anyway, because they naturally have a tendency towards secrecy and doing things off the books and whatever. And that's why you have inspectors and whatever. And even then, you still often dancing with shadows. But when we heard last year Dr. Dlamini Zuma saying, talking about local government. No, well, we made some bad deployments, but don't worry, these new ones, they're going to be absolutely top-notch, amazing deployments. They're going to be the deployments that make deployments great again. Sorry, you're working with a fundamentally fetid, rotten system. It just kind of, you could choose between complete disaster and complete catastrophe.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things that are as dangerous to the sort of democratic fabric of a society as a completely out of control and rogue spy agency, because they have extraordinary powers to hide from public scrutiny, and they have extraordinary powers to and skills to mess around with stuff like the media, which is very worrying. And hearing these stories, it makes one perhaps think back on various media lines and articles and things that have been written over the past couple of years, especially during the Zuma era, and you kind of wonder, kind of creates an atmosphere of paranoia, I suppose. I don't know. Sara, do you think I'm being crazy when I say that?
In this climate,
just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you.
Exactly. And in the case of what appears to be what Zuma got up to, that Terence elaborated on, paranoia was currency. But it does explain. Do you remember the look on Zuma's face when Cyril won the ANC presidency? And I'm sure what went into that was all the efforts that had been employed through the SSA to influence the media and buy off people and undermine, etc. That, quite elaborate by the sounds of it, came to naught, ostensibly. And the other thing that must have gone into the look on his face is the fact that the agency was paying him a monthly amount. I think it was 2.5 million from 2015 to the year end 2000. or mid-year 2016, and then from 2016 to the financial year in 2017, he was getting 4.5 million rand a month. Now, I mean, it's almost like being
nice
on
work if you can get it.
If you get it. Yeah, I mean, it's like being on their payroll. I mean, one knows that, you know, that Zuma would have been paid from a whole range of sources for a whole range of reasons just to have him in the money. But this is quite something. I mean, this is like it's like a pick and pay. You know, the SAA was there to do a whole range of things on behalf of Zuma. You just had to sort of go from shelf to shelf, and there'd be a different thing that they were doing on Zuma's behalf. I think the only thing that changing cadres is going to do is perhaps provide a little less corruption and a little less finucare. But the bottom line is, and this is something one of the things that the ANC will not let go of, despite its complete negativity for the populace, is you cannot deploy cadres Freudian slip, unless you happen upon a cadre who has exactly the skills and experience you need, and that is so unlikely. But then again, if your primary sort of focus is the survival of the party, you're not really going to care about whether the cadre does or does not actually serve the interests of the people. It's an absolutely appalling system, but it's what the ANC's wedded to.
Yeah, and it's extremely dangerous for the country.
You know,
Terence.
Just a comment on that. The ANC is very fond of talking about the developmental state, this mighty institution that will power us through to the broad sunlit uplands of prosperity and growth. And you know, here's the thing. This is an idea that's very attractive, because this was South Korea and this was Singapore and this was Taiwan, and to some extent this is China. But you read the stuff about that. Your developmental state employs its best and its brightest, and it also is not beholden to societal influences. Yes, it is like connected to them, but you know, it's going to do its own thing because this is the thing that needs to be done. So yeah, you know, it on the one hand, let's cadre deploy until, you know, we've destroyed the deployment, or the deployment has destroyed the whatever. But you know, then we talk about, oh yeah, we must be like South Korea. Well, you know, there's some cognitive dissonance there, isn't there?
Yeah, no, there's a case of pick one.
Yeah, well, it's for a case of, you know, pick two things that are mutually contradictory and believe both of them at the same time. I don't know. Weird stuff happens in this country.
I think that's
generally not good.
So, last thought from you, Sara, on this is the Zondo Commission's still going on and on and on, and we've made jokes before about how it seems to be dragging. What do you think? When do you think it's going to wrap up?
Well, he has asked for an extension of another 3 months. He was meant to wrap up at the end of March, but it's almost as if, like, you know, there's been a sort of rollover effect of just sheer volume and horribleness of what's come before that commission as time has rolled on. And I think also Zondo himself has probably come to the realization that it is so bad out there, he just has to keep uncovering it. I think the problem, though, is it's really never been about so much uncovering as what they're going to do with it. Although I guess the uncovering helps other people to do things with it, but it shows it's very unlikely much of it's going to come from the state. So whether he'll get that extension, I don't know, and I'm not sure at the moment whether it matters, unless somebody comes for the commission that is really earth-shattering. I don't know. There's a commission lag is set in.
Yeah, I mean, I have found the Zondo Commission a little like, you know, Days of Our Lives. You know, in that it just kind of like carries on forever, and you know, you have the same character played by different actors over the years and whatever.
Right. It makes everyone sort of numb to everything that's going on.
No, absolutely. Look, I think Sorry, I was just going to say, I think if a lot of these people, if the state's not going to deal with them, then if they belong to professional bodies, let them be chucked off those bodies or whatever it may be, that you can actually, outside of the public sphere, have some effect, because it's often losing a job has more effect than being imprisoned for the fraud, so I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, these are the days of our lives.
Well, my camera appears to be freezing a little bit, so apologies for that. Anyway, let us move on to our next topic, and this is, of course, a big debate that's raging, I think, not so much in the media, although in some places like on the Daily Friend, dailyfriend.co.za, where you can see all of our great opinion articles. And this is the question of people who are skeptical of COVID-19 vaccines. You see people who are, have this view in comment sections everywhere, and there's quite I think it's fair to say there's lots of different surveys that have found different numbers for this, but generally speaking, there's a very significant proportion of South Africa's population who are cautious or skeptical about the COVID-19 vaccine, and they have various concerns, mostly relating to side effects, some relating to conspiracy theories, and some just sort of generally worried that it's too new and it hasn't been tested properly. A UJ professor from the Center for Social Change at the University of Johannesburg has said that she believes that the majority of people who are skeptical about the COVID-19 vaccine were simply demanding more information in order to make an informed decision. So UJ did an online survey of 10,000 people and found that 67% of them would definitely or probably take the vaccine once it was available to them. Many participants indicated they wanted to know more about the vaccine and any possible side effects. There also was some interesting breakdowns of this data. Now, we don't know if this is fully representative of the South African population. I don't think it is. But it's still kind of interesting to think about, and that is that 69% of Black respondents said that they would take the vaccine, and this number was only 55 for white respondents. Also, people with less than a matric education were much more likely to want to take the vaccine than those with a tertiary education. Now that's quite interesting, because the sort of, I don't know, the 5 minutes analysis on TV view that you might suck out of your thumb would suggest the opposite. But I think what's going on here is that there's a big movement online, and I think some of it comes from the sort of new age health stuff that seems to have a very negative view of vaccines. So, Terence, let me start with you. What are your thoughts here? How should this discussion be had? What should anyone do about it?
So I'm a little bit torn here, because on the one hand, I think people who have concerns have a right to raise them. I also don't advocate simply taking the words of experts at their or taking experts at their words. On the other hand, I do think that a virologist or a vaccine developer or whatever knows a great deal more about this than I. And I've benefited from vaccines, my kids vaccinated, etc. So, I certainly think that one can approach this with some degree of confidence. As for the phenomenon about people who are more educated or more affluent turning up their nose, I think that's maybe one of the dangers, can we put it that way, of being of living in an era that's flush with information, that there's a great deal that you can pick and choose from. Also, I think that to be middle class in the first quarter of the 21st century enables you to indulge yourself in a way that previous generations couldn't. My father grew up, saying, how the thought of diphtheria was terrifying to his generation. Polio, things like that we just have no connection with anymore. Smallpox. so yes, of course, when your concept of mortality, tends to hinge on lifestyle diseases and people dying of cancer in their 80s and whatever. Perhaps there's a switch in your brain that says, well, what we need is holistic medicine and being in touch with our spirit guides and whatever. There's, progress is not necessarily, modernization is not necessarily a linear thing. If you are somebody who does not have those resources, who is not exposed to that sort of pick and mix of and buffet of information, and actually has to deal with the impacts of health crises up close and personal, you're probably going to be far more inclined to put your trust in people who you assume know what they're doing. That would be the way that I would that I would understand it. In a sense, it takes a particular social position to be worried that the shape-shifting lizards are controlling the world.
Indeed so. Sara, your thoughts on this? You've had a lot of interaction recently with people who are skeptical.
Just to go back to the original point raised about people just wanting to know more. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. The only problem is what information do you get, where do you get it from, and who do you believe? I mean, I certainly, without a science background, it's very difficult for me to gainsay somebody who's usually very, very strong, seemingly cogent reasons for objecting to the vaccine. But really, for most people, the best you can do is get information from a source you rely upon. And in this respect, people are going to rely on the government, and there hasn't been huge debates in public about between the government and experts about whether the vaccines work or not, or whether they're safe or not. The debates have largely been about the laxity of government buying any and how they're going to roll it out, and the practical side. Where the concern is raised for me is I've seen a number of reports of what they call on the frontline health workers who said they'd be reluctant to take the vaccine. Now, when they refer to health workers, by and large, they're not referring to doctors. And I do know from experience that very often, even from nurses downwards, what they know about medicine is not sufficient to stand on its own. I'm in the fortunate position of I'm married to a doctor who has connections with the sort of people that one would most likely trust. They work for a virology institute. They have very good names, and from my point of view as a layman, that's the best information I can rely on. So again, if the question is where's the information going to come from, one of the things that's really concerned me from the Daily Friend point of view is our interaction with people who've had an anti-vaccination position. Is very often the positions are very strongly defended. There's evidence put forward, there are sources put forward, etc. Some of my delving into the sources reveals sort of outliers and people who've been fired from institutions, and others have said, look, they've had direct medical experience with it, and it's obviously very difficult to argue. But what concerns me is they don't like us for the opinion we express, and it's generally, I think, a broadly opinion that the institute members, the people who work for the institute, share. If it wasn't, then my colleagues would write articles saying the vaccines are a problem, and here's the reason why. And so we haven't. So generally there's consensus, which there isn't always on any subject, and we've done that. But they're sort of taking the view that we must somehow write the opposite view. Now, we can't hold an opinion that we don't believe in. My offer to people has been, please write a rebuttal. I'd be very happy to print it and to publish it. But for us to do it would mean, to delve into that is actually terribly, terribly difficult. And the fact that we haven't had any articles against, because people haven't presented, even for publication, their views. And I'm neither in a position nor do I have the time to go through the evidence they present. But certainly I get very nervous, with the sort of vehemence to the point of rudeness, which not exactly necessary, but I get very nervous when they blame Bill Gates for taking over the world and implanting microchips in your body. What I know about Bill Gates, and I've read a fair amount and I've seen a couple of good documentaries, he's done a huge amount for health on this continent, and to smear him in that sort of broad sort of conspiracy way, I'm not prepared to accept evidence that comes from there. I may be wrong, but I'm not prepared to do it, not from what I know. So the bottom line is, ultimately for most people, it's to go to the sources they trust. And then the case for most people is going to be government and the government media.
Yeah. Look, I think there's some, so like, for example, I was talking to my colleague, our colleague Gabriel yesterday, and he said that, if the government said, we're only getting the Chinese vaccine in South Africa and that's what you're going to get, I would be a lot more sympathetic, shall we say, to the skepticism of vaccines, because I think that the Communist Party of China does not have a good track record of doing things like that. But broadly speaking, I've gotten vaccines my whole life. I've never had that protect me from diseases, so yeah, I think it's important that we don't sort of completely crush this debate, because there's a tendency in the mainstream media to do that, and of course it doesn't really work.
Yeah, can I just say, with regard to the Russians and the Chinese, is my concern is raised over the fact that, and I've read it from a number of media sources for what it's worth, is that we have to rely on what they say about their vaccines. They have not opened their research and their findings to the outside world. Now, all I need to know is that all parties have opened it up for scrutiny by institutions that have credibility. But since Russia and China have not, I would be reluctant.
I've heard some better things about the Russian one, though. It seems to be better than the Chinese one, at least.
I think the Israelis are involved.
Yeah, and also India got tested and they said that it wasn't too bad. Final thoughts on this, Terence?
I'm just going to pick up on something that Sara said about people who hold particularly strong opinions and then do not wish to argue them themselves, but demand that others argue on their behalf, or believe that there is some sort of conspiracy of silence or some sort of moral failing if you don't take up a cause that is dear to them. Privately, over the last year, I have been hassled by a few people, demanding that I take a stand or speak out against Donald Trump. Now, as you guys know, I very, very reluctantly speak on foreign matters, because I'm very, very careful about addressing things where I don't feel that I'm adequately knowledgeable. But this, went from, but this really escalated to a point where it became extremely offensive to me that this was now being seen as a sort of test of my moral fiber. No matter, so look, I have opinions, but I'm not going to share them publicly. I don't particularly want to enter into a discussion with somebody whom I know on a very casual basis. But repeatedly, I would get messages, which have this sort of undertone to them. So, have you finally decided to stop beating your wife and child? One doesn't need to hold an opinion on every single issue. One doesn't, and I think it's actually a mark of intellectual integrity to say that I don't know enough about this, and then I'm going to stand back, or I will accept the premise on the basis that I accept that other people know this better. My broad response is that while I would value the opinions of Samuel P. Huntington on global geopolitics, the late, I would value the opinions on running a restaurant from Gordon Ramsay, not vice versa. and so when it comes to questions like the vaccine, I will tend to go with what I consider the bulk of expertise. If somebody has an argument, by all means make that argument. I would also just like to add that the fact that something is well sourced and has an authoritative look about it does not necessarily stop it from being nonsense. Does anyone remember the Castro Tlongwane document?
Yes.
Geese, cats, caravans. That thing was a monster. I think actually someone make it into a book, and it shows a commendable amount of research. It's been attributed to Thabo Mbeki and to Peter Mokaba, but apparently it's just nonsense if you look at or at least it's gravely misleading if you look at it in total.
Yeah, so I'm gonna close our discussion here, but my final thought on that is remember that critical race theory is extraordinarily well sourced.
And we only just started on that one.
Yeah. Anyway, let us close now, and thank you very much for listening. I'm sure there will be at least some debate in the comments over what we've just said. But I hope that you all have a wonderful day, and hopefully we will see you tomorrow on YouTube, on your podcast apps, on thedailyfriend.co.za. Thank you very much for listening, and have a wonderful day.